figure out where the button is. Okay, perfect. There we go. So thank you for joining us at the Janus Oasis. And my name is Nola Simon. I'm the host. And with us today is Benjamin Warsinski. Did I get that right?
Warsinski, yep.
Warsinski. Okay, perfect. I should have actually clarified that before we started recording. So I just call him Benjamin, and usually seems to go fine from there. He is somebody that I've actually done a podcast with myself. He approached me on Twitter, and I was fascinated with his approach. And I was also very interested in the community that he's built up around his podcast as well. And he was actually the person who inspired me to start my podcast community. So thank you for that, Benjamin. He's very generous and very warm. And he is actually the founder. He's a brand culture and change consultant of Branded World. And he's also, he walks his talk. I floated this idea of doing a video version of our podcast right before we started recording. And he was like, yes, we could do this. So yes, this is the test run of a video podcast of the Janus Oasis. And it's only going to be housed in the Janus Oasis just to test out how it goes over and how we like it. And thank you for that, Benjamin. So
of course.
Is there anything I missed out in the introduction that you would like to make sure that we capture? What do people need to know about you that I didn't know?
I guess the other thing is, if you're watching the video, you can see part of my Lego collection, and that I'm a Lego serious play facilitator. So I use play and purposeful play in my work to help bring about insights.
Very cool. That's actually interesting because when my father-in-law passed away, one of the only things my husband actually bought with the proceeds of the estate was actually all of these Lego kits. Like I own these massive Star Wars Lego kits. I don't know them. He owns them, but they live in my house. We've got the Death Star, and we've got, I don't know what other giant things that come out of Star Wars. We have all of those because it was right around the time that all the new movies came out. So yeah, I have
that's amazing.
Lego in my house and some princess Lego. I do admire that you've got some princess Lego back there too. So
yeah, I like all the themes because they all blend together, and that's what makes it really fun to see how they could interact and connect to each other.
Yeah, definitely. So let's actually start with talking about community, and we'll come back to the play stuff. So as I mentioned, Benjamin runs Bricks and Brand. Is that correct? I'm in that all the time. I'm just like, I don't even know. I know the logos. And it's actually a really fascinating community that he's built up around the podcast. And this is where he actually posts the video versions of the podcast, and then he does audio as well. And so can you tell the story about how you built your community and why you started it, and what's your experience been with building that community?
Yeah, totally. My experience with community really started with my consulting career. And as a strategic planner or an urban planner, I was working with lots of different stakeholders, and that included both private clients, but then also the public in some ways. And so we had to engage with them and understand what it was that they were looking for. And so that was my first aspect to community building, in that we had to build trust. We had to get to know what their requirements were, what their needs were, and then also make it feel that they were a part of the process. Because just in change, any kind of change, people don't really like change. And when we're planning for the future and we're saying, hey, this building is going to go away, and in its place, it may be a building with a different configuration and your space may get smaller, they take some offense to that sometimes. And so we had to find ways to encourage them to share what they were actually feeling, so that we could actually build something that they would agree to and that they could use and see as a benefit versus taking that away from them. So that was my first experience with community. And I got to do that with projects all around the world, which was really fascinating from a cultural perspective, understanding all the different culture nuances and how people view different things. And that's where my love for community and kind of understanding all the different perspectives came to be. And so when I left Hawaii and moved to Chicago, I was in this kind of strange space. I was working remotely and managing projects in Japan and Guam, but I was sitting in Chicago and knew no one outside of my wife's family, which was like five people. And so I literally was like, it was this weird kind of experience where I was like, wow, like I'm doing work in Hawaii and Guam and Japan, but I don't know anybody where I'm actually living. And so then when that work ended, I ended up starting my creative agency, and I really quickly realized I knew no one. And so I basically had to start from ground zero and go into the world and meet people in real life and start to build my community that way. And so I got involved in a lot of different organizations, one being the Chicago Urban League. I was a kind of a teacher, and I would teach entrepreneurship and branding and strategy to help young business owners build their brand and get their business off the ground. And that was just an amazing experience. And I'm still friends with the director at the time, and now he's moved on to another position. But it was really interesting to be part of that community and come in and share my experience with them and help them get away from the mistakes that I made so that they could get there faster and find success faster. And so then I was also part of several different networking groups and entrepreneurial groups. And what I really realized was I was part of all these different groups, but people didn't know each other from the different groups. So then I became a connector and started connecting people. And they were like, wait, how do you know this person from this group and this person from this group? And I was like, oh, I'm part of all these different groups. And people were like, that's amazing. And so I didn't really see that as an asset at the time. I was just like, well, that's just how I meet people. But then I learned to see that, wow, that's really valuable. And so this idea of community and online communities in particular always fascinated me, but I wasn't really sure like how that all worked. And so it's this idea in the back burner, but it never made its way to the front or to the priority until the pandemic happened. And so when the pandemic happened, all of my work, which was in person doing facilitations and consulting and speaking events, all that went away. And so I had to rebuild. And I was like, well, okay, what do I do? And I came across Mighty Networks, and I had been exploring to use them for a different project that didn't take off. And I went back and revisited them, and I was like, this could be something. This is pretty cool. It's a way to bring people together, and you can connect still virtually on camera, and we can still use the Lego Serious Play facilitation. And so there's all these different things. And then the fact that it could scale and that I could reach members around the world, I was like, okay, there's something here. So I basically dove in and started building and started learning the principles of community design and taking what I had learned from facilitating and consulting and kind of layered both of them together to really understand how to build a community and how to connect and bring people together. And it's been a fascinating journey for the last couple of years.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. And Benjamin actually gives access to people that he's had on his podcast to his community. And that's how I dove into it and really tested out, because I'm also part of Urgent Optimists, and they have a fantastic version of it as well too. And so I've been comparing all of these things, and it was funny you mentioned meeting other people. In your group, I actually met a guy from Australia that I'm part of, like another networking group. So that happened
Oh,
to
no
me as
way.
well too.
That's awesome.
And so it's really interesting that you're talking about the value of that, because you do pull in different pieces of your life. And it's cool because everybody knows different aspects of each other. And it's a way of
Mhm.
really actually getting to know people better. There's all this talk about authenticity, right? So are you on
Yes.
LinkedIn? Are you on Twitter? And are you being authentic there? And then it's okay. If you only take that at face value, you don't really dive in deep enough to the person. So that's what I find fascinating about the community aspects, is just like, it's not really just the one and done, what you happen to see pop up in your feed. It's an ongoing representation of that person, and you get to interact in a different way at a different level. You go much deeper in terms of understanding who the people are, and
Yeah.
you can really get to know the people who are authentic and who are not quite authentic. Although the groups that I tend to belong to really attract the people who do bring that out. But I find it fascinating as well. And I got to give you credit for really starting from scratch, where you knew but nobody in real life and had to leverage that. I feel like I'm starting from scratch, and I've only got like 5,000 followers on LinkedIn, and you had nobody in real life. I've lived where I live for 20 years, and that's a different aspect of it as well too. And it's almost like how you can anchor, right? So what can you anchor in your personal life, and then what can you anchor in your professional life, and kind of move between the two and make progress. And I love the connector piece. That's a really cool thing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. No, go
so
ahead.
do you feel like more secure in your network now? And how long have you been in Chicago now?
I've been in Chicago for about 7 years now. And yeah, I do feel more secure. I think the once the pandemic kind of happened, like everything shifted, the priorities shifted, and like you quickly realize who, like you said, who's like authentic and kind of like your real kind of friends and support network, and who was just there to ride the coattails or to be
Yeah.
associated with, and they all just fell away. So it's really been that, and that's what I really love about the Bricks and Brands community and the like my LinkedIn connections and the communities that I'm a part of. Like those people I can really count on and know that's who I really want to be in community with. And so it's been a really fascinating like reflection point to try to realize that and understand that, and then to lean into it and actually focus on it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, and that was one piece of advice that I saw you share in Mighty Community, because Mighty Networks runs their own community as well too. You actually went through and removed the people who weren't necessarily engaging, and that actually improved the engagement level because the people who were there value being there. And
Yes.
honestly, it's the same like on LinkedIn too. There are a lot of people who they're just the lurkers, and it's like, why are you
Yes.
here?
Yes. And that's, I don't know whether it's flattering or whether it's like not flattering, but like people that are just there and lurking, that's great. Like you're an awesome person, but if you're not going to engage as a private community, and I want to have the best experience for my members possible, and to be able to deliver that, if you're not going to engage or interact, then maybe it's not a good fit for you. And like that, having that line in the sand, and that was a big thing that I've come to realize is, wait a minute, this is how the community operates, and this is what you need to show up and actually get value from it, because I want you to see it as valuable. And if you don't, that's no problem, you can leave. But so it's a very kind of interesting thing to see, like who kind of joins and then who falls off. And there's no right or wrong. It doesn't matter if it's for you or if it's not for you, or maybe it's not for you at that time and then you want to join later on and it's a great fit. But none of that really matters. It's just about if you really want to be there and to be active. I think that's the best part about the community, is when you're active and you're engaging and you're helping one another, then everyone can benefit from that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's about the perception of value as well, too. Like everybody has different values and they join community for different reasons. So
yeah,
if something's really going on in somebody's life, when my mom got really sick, like do I have the bandwidth to do the type of negotiating and networking, and it kind of ebbs and flows, right? Depending on what's happening for the person too. So yeah, no, that's really cool.
Completely.
Yeah, I find it really inspirational. And I really actually just like they've got gifts. It's my big thing this month, is like they have gifts.
Yeah, the Mighty Networks in general has come a long way very quickly in the last like 2 years or so since I've joined, and I'm just like the biggest fan of them. I can't stop saying enough like awesome things. Gina Biacani, the founder, she's just absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
She's so inspiring and so energizing. It just makes you want to lean in even more.
Yeah. And it was interesting. I attended a meeting that she did yesterday for one of the hosts, and somebody had asked her a question, like this person, whatever she's doing with her community, like money is not her motivator. She has enough money. She's just looking to spread her message and help people. And she's actually struggling to get people because she doesn't want to charge anything. That's not at all what she's about. And Gina had a real point. She's like, people pay attention to what they pay for. And if you're actually collecting money, then people are going to pay attention to it. And if you don't need the money, for one, you could use the money to actually develop resources for the community and invest it all back into the community so that every member is getting the benefit of that money. But also you could actually donate it. So collect the money, make as much money as you can, because the idea has value, the community has value and whatnot, and then donate it, but be super transparent about the value. And then all of a sudden you're going to be attracting many members who actually, the message of your community really resonates, but the purpose and the vision and like the social impact and benefit is an additional aspect of it too. And it was like, that was really admirable too, because a lot of people, I personally am there, I need to cover the cost of the community. I'm hoping to make some money out of it. I'm not in that position where I can totally donate everything, but I thought it was fascinating the way that she was able to reposition it as you're actually doing your community a disservice by not even considering the paid app.
Yeah, and you do yourself kind of a disservice as well, because when you're starting a community or any type of thing, it's going to take a huge amount of effort and energy on your part and resources on your part to get it off the ground and build some traction and some momentum. And all of that takes money. And so if you're not charging, or if you don't have any other way of bringing in revenue to cover the costs of just the operating costs, you're going to end up doing yourself a disservice and and burn out most likely. And so I think it's really important to, the other aspect is to think about who is it that you're bringing together, and how hard would it be for them to meet those people outside of your community. As that facilitator, as a connector, you're doing that's a huge level of value to connect people that they otherwise wouldn't get a chance to meet. And so yet, if you think about it in that way, you're like, wait a minute, if I charge $30 a month, but they're able to meet X, Y, and Z people that could transform my life, or could add a ton of money to my bottom line for my business, or maybe help me land a new job, what is that worth to them? That would be, that could be life-changing. So when you reframe it, it really changes kind of everything.
Yeah. And that's honestly why I do a lot of networking groups, because like where I live, 60 kilometers north of Toronto, there are no networking groups up here. Like we don't, convention things, voting happens at schools and like the arena. And when you go to those kind of things, you get real estate agents. And I don't run into people who specialize in hybrid remote work.
Yeah.
Where I live, like those people I find online, and I find them all around the world. And so that's where it's a huge advantage for me to be able to network like that. And it's really cool, the aspect of community. And I actually was reading yesterday, I'm not sure if you've come across any of these articles, where organizations are really trying to expand on like the employee experience and the employee engagement aspect by building community. And the community manager experience has a huge value, just because with distributed work, you've got people all over the world who are working for the same company, they're coworkers, but they don't necessarily know everybody, and they don't know how to get to know everybody and leverage and build those networks and those skills.
Yeah, that's just a huge value add. Like you said, I remember working for a large multinational consulting firm, and it was all kind of project based. So you really had to network and know your team and your leaders, and then be able to jump to the next project. And all of that takes networking and understanding your value and your worth and how you can fit into another project and like your skill set. And if you didn't understand those things, it was very challenging to find your place, and you may end up out of a job because you couldn't jump onto another project. And so the same thing, I think community can help bridge that gap. I think the problem with how people have viewed communities in the past online is like a Facebook community or a Facebook group where people just come together and they're like, oh, we have a community, it's the Facebook group, but no one is interacting, or if they're interacting, it's just promotion, and it's just like, it's not helpful, it's not valuable to anyone, and you're not really meeting anyone. It's based on transactional things versus actually getting to know the people, which is what I think the Mighty Networks and just the way that they structure their communities is so much more valuable, but then also much more meaningful. And so if companies can adopt like the Mighty Networks way of community building, I think then you would have just an amazing employee experience that could be like unmatched. But it takes a lot of work, and it's a very different intention for that community. And so it'll be really interesting to see if companies understand that and if they allow that to happen, because that's a whole nother discussion.
Yeah. Oh, of course. There was something that came out of Apple, and it basically said that Apple, despite like their products bringing together people, they actively encourage silos and different aspects of the company to really not engage with each other, just from, I guess, intellectual property, privacy concerns, all that stuff. But I find that fascinating. So yeah, no, I agree with you. That's a different level organizational design question, really.
Yeah.
I love there's certain aspects of Mighty Networks that I find really interesting. It was funny because I was just going through, I belong to a variety now. So I was just going through and making sure that my profile was updated. I love their profiles page. You can link in so many different places where you are. It's fantastic. It's one of the best developed profiles that I've come across. But it was interesting because I was completing the Mighty community one, and I just had updated the introduction prompt. And I did not know until I actually got a greeting message from Gina herself, who's the founder of Mighty Networks, that when you complete the introduction on the Mighty Network profile, it automatically posts in the main feed. So you're automatically going to get interaction from like the host, from other people who happen to be really active and engaged, because instantly I got like welcome messages. And so it was
Oh,
funny
that's
because
awesome.
yeah, I didn't know it functioned like that. They're adding in things to make it more magical. I love that
Mhm.
she references things that are magical and play based because it's unexpected. So it's not sign up, fill out your profile, do this, change your notifications, all of that stuff. Now the focus is really more on introduce yourself so we can say hi to you. We can get to know who you are right away. We can value you. They have an ambassador program. If you've been referred and you sign up via the link, the person who actually gave you the link gets notified that you're there so they can welcome you. So the example in the background is really just like you walk into a party and the person that invited you to come to the party got there ahead of you, but they don't know you're there. That's what it feels like on a lot of different social networks. But at Mighty Networks, now that they've got this, the person who invited you can come find you because they know where you are.
That's it's such a needed feature. And then also for the host, you can see who is referring people, and then you can go and thank them and start conversations that way as well. So it's such an awesome way to add more value, especially to an online community where, like you said, like you can jump in and sometimes you're like, is anyone here? Like
Yeah.
and it can feel kind of like a lonely place sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Yeah. Okay. So I think we've covered the best parts of community, but now let's shift into like your play base because it's really the same sort of thing. Is like, how do you go from like that magical kind of like feeling that you create in community and use this in your consulting work as well, too? Tell me, I know theoretically what Lego based consulting work looks like and how they use that with change management and employee engagement and project work, but can you summarize it for people who aren't necessarily familiar with it?
Yeah, just like my experience with it. So I'm a Lego, like adult fan of Lego, I guess you would call it an AFOL. I've been a Lego fan my entire life. And that's what got me into design and landscape architecture and urban planning. And through design work, it's a lot of kind of bringing people together and working with them through a process to come up with a solution. And just through my work and through networking, I stumbled across Lego Serious Play as a methodology. And when I discovered it, I was like, wait a minute, like I can use Lego in my work. Like I've always used Lego in my work but no one knew about it. And now I can like actually use it in my work and have it be okay to do. And yeah, so the way that it works is, so Lego Serious Play is kind of a radical, innovative method that kind of, it's very unconventional. So it's all about bringing people together and creating a level playing field and creating a very safe environment for people to explore and to share and to create and ideate and ask questions. And it's meant to pull out insights that you otherwise wouldn't necessarily get in a traditional meeting setting. So if you think about a traditional meeting, if everyone comes together, there's maybe 8 or 10 people, and you're in a conference room, there's a whiteboard, and they're like, all right, here's the objective. We need to come up with 20 different ideas, go. And like immediately people are going to be like, wait, what? So you're going to have 2 or 3 people that dominate the conversation. You're going to have other people that feel unsafe or they don't want to say the wrong thing. They're going to be much more reserved. They're going to sit back in their chair. Maybe they're going to have their head down. They're going to maybe take notes, but they're not going to interact. And so you get this kind of, it's not an even amount of ideas across the participants if everyone is even participating. And so Lego Serious Play is like the complete opposite of that. It's a safe building environment. It's a safe environment, and everyone gets to build and everyone gets to share the story of their model. And there's absolutely no right or wrong. So when you're in that environment, everybody gets to have their voice heard. Everyone gets to be seen. And in doing so, you get to hear all these different perspectives, which changes the entire energy of the room and the challenge that you're trying to solve, no matter the problem, whether it's about connecting people and or solving conflict within a team, or getting to know one another so they can work more efficiently and more productively together, or maybe it's solving a new strategic initiative, a new initiative or a new product, whatever it is, everybody gets to be part of that process. And so it's just been really amazing to see kind of people that are more introverted or reserved, or people who say, I don't play with Lego, I've never played with Lego, but to see them like light up and be like a kid again and share their ideas. I've had people who said they were so anxious, they were like, I don't think I'm going to participate at all. And then they tried it and we couldn't get them to stop. Like they just wanted to keep building and sharing. And they just felt so alive and confident. And you could literally see their energy levels just rise. And the managers and the leaders see that in them, and they're like, wow, like we can go to them with these types of projects, or like to have them complete this type of work, or we never knew that they were so passionate about this. Now we can put them on this project, and we can ask them more questions about it, and we can figure out ways to have them thrive as part of our team. So it's been really amazing to see those results and transformation.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. And it gets, because there's a tactile aspect to it, right? Like it gets people out of their heads. So now all of a sudden it's not an
Yes.
intellectual solution that you're looking for. It's something that's really going to activate different areas of the brain because you're using that tactile
Yeah.
function. In the context too of designing a house, and everybody's designing like a model of a house, you're talking about different values, and everybody has a different perception of what a home should be. And
Yep.
you've got a context to talk about that then you can then extrapolate and apply to your actual work problems. I think that's genius. It's really cool.
Yeah.
You can
Yeah. No,
totally see how that would work.
it's absolutely amazing.
Yeah. It's interesting. There are a lot of different aspects that I find are being brought into work these days. And often you see there's a lot of crossover with theater, like just improv, right? Idea of running
Mm-hmm.
improv sessions and getting people to act out scenarios.
And then the other thing that you're doing through play is you're bringing those walls down, and
Yeah.
you're letting all the inhibitions go away. So people become less defensive. They
Yeah.
become much more open to receiving, much more open to different ideas coming in, because we've also set up the environment in a way where all that is acceptable,
Yeah.
versus maybe a traditional office where you like barge into someone's office with an idea and they're going to be like, no, like I'm trying to write this email, or whatever it is. So yeah, it helps. It's just amazing to see how all of that can happen when you allow for that to take place.
Yeah, no, it's really fascinating. So it's funny because the company I used to work with, they would do like Lego avatars. So like you
Hmm.
would do like certain actions and then you would get a brick and then you could build your avatar. And so this takes
Awesome.
that, but it way beyond it. Because honestly, like you got to a certain number of bricks and I was like, okay, whatever. But it just lived on your desk and that's all it was good for. It
Gotcha.
was like a status symbol. It's like, I have 15 bricks and I can build a robot. And then somebody else had a block or a rectangle. It was a status thing. So this I like better. I think that's got a lot of value to it. So that's cool. Once you've seen your CEO try to build like a Lego tree and fail and be vulnerable about it, and okay, it almost creates trust, right?
It does. It creates a lot of trust and a lot of connection really quickly. I was facilitating a networking kind of a networking group. It was like unnetworking through play. It was conversations through play, and everyone was a stranger to each other. And 10 minutes into the session, someone like stopped me and raised their hand. They were like, this person that I've been sitting across the table from, I don't know them from straight up, but after that last activity, I feel like I've known them my entire life. And so that's how deep it can go, like really quickly.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. And this is an approach that's actually Lego branded, like Lego stands behind this approach.
Yes, Lego actually developed the methodology, and so I got certified through a company that is affiliated with Lego as like master trainers.
Okay, cool. That's interesting. I
Yeah.
wonder how they actually use that to advance their brand. Especially,
Yeah. So I know that they have a Lego Play Day once a year for all of their staff. And then I also know that I think they use probably Lego Serious Play activities throughout their work. But then they also have a Lego education line, which is more geared towards students and schools. And so they've really expanded the methodology. And what I love about it the most is sometimes people think it's all about, oh, play is a nice to have, or let's do it as an icebreaker. But it's really not those things. It's really about how do you actually get into that state of play to solve the problem that you're trying to do at work. So it's really a completely different state of mind, and it's play to not play as a nice to have at work, if that makes sense.
it's not the horrendous Jeopardy sessions that feel like kill me now if I have to
Yeah.
play Jeopardy one more time.
Yeah.
Apologies to the people who love Jeopardy, but I think it's in its heyday personally. I think I'd rather be playing with Lego. So we had a chat once about the connection between employer brand and employee engagement, and really how it's really important to thread the authenticity and the storytelling through the company. How do you perceive that play would help employers actually tell the story of what it's like to work for the company and really amp up that employee engagement and community factor?
That's a really good question. So when I think everyone interprets the word play in a different way. So maybe the word play is not the best word to use, but to substitute that, I would say maybe curiosity or creativity or innovation. A lot of the words that companies are already using, but the tricky part is that they use those words like, hey, we're a creative bunch or we're whatever. And then when you actually are working for them, you're like, wow, I don't feel creative at all. Like I'm in the stale cubicle and I attached to my desk because I have like not a laptop. I'm not able to leave. And so there's all these things that are constraining me to this cubicle that I don't feel creative in. And so I think it's more about allow for people to be creative within their work environment. How do you allow them to think in different ways and use their hands to think and to help solve problems and communicate with one another versus the traditional kind of like just keyboards and digital things. I think it's all about, excuse me, just opening up and trying different things. So as a company, it would be kind of like walk your talk. It would be actually like creating opportunities for your employees and team members to actually do those things, to find different insights, different outcomes, and have a different experience than others. And I think that would be where I would start.
Okay. And to me, the obvious connection here is you're building an inclusive environment because you're inviting people to be creative, you're inviting people to address solutions and engage and communicate in a different way. There's a huge thing about neurodivergent, and I'm not an expert in neurodivergence at all, but having that tactile aspect and having environments where they're not necessarily overstimulated, but they can control their stimulus, that could be
Yeah.
a good possibility as well too, right?
Yeah, completely. And actually, I've noticed in facilitating virtually, it actually is huge benefit because you can read captions, you can have live captioning on the screen, and then you can also read people's stories of their models through the chat or through wherever they're uploading that. And so if you're a quiet introverted person and you just want to like read that and take in information in a different way, this virtual environment helps you do that. But then you're also building and thinking with your hands yourself. So a lot of things are happening, but within that virtual environment, there's actually a huge benefit to being much more inclusive. And I think using something like Lego could be even another value add on top of that for employees.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting because everybody's multitasking while mute functions on too. So at least if you're giving them Lego, they're doing something that you've asked them to do.
Yeah, exactly.
But great point about the chat, because I love the chat because it's a different avenue. It's a second avenue of connection.
Mhm.
And people process in a different way. Like I'm a reader, so I will read your chat before I'm going to really absorb what you've said. And
Yep.
Adam Grant actually did a podcast episode earlier this week where they were talking about the dual modality of meetings where you actually had like the presentation, but you had the chat, and the deep work is happening in the chat.
Yes. Yeah. And I think it's also about how comfortable do you make people feel if you're in a webinar or like on a Zoom meeting and you've got all these different boxes. If that can be intimidating to turn your microphone on and say something, but if you're thinking of it and you just want to type it and feel like that feels better to you, you should be allowed to do that. And then the great thing is that conversation can be downloaded afterwards. So then you can go back and see what people said and gain more insight into how and what they were thinking and why.
Yeah, and that's been a huge issue in the virtual environment as well too, is like how do you capture the knowledge that is surfaced during all of these meetings? Yeah, downloading the chat is an excellent way of documenting and keeping your knowledge management up to date as well too. So that's a great point too.
Well, and when you think about traditional meetings, I think there's a lot of information lost in those meetings as well, because if you only have that one record from the note keeping that was like maybe official, but you have everyone else going around the room and soaking it in, but then not sharing that, you're kind of losing all that institutional knowledge as well.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Yeah, like your note taking is really being filtered through one person's perspective.
Yeah.
Whereas the chat could be everybody that's in that room if they're brave enough to engage, which is
Yeah.
it's automatically diverse, it's automatically inclusive.
Yep. And I would put that on the meeting leader or the facilitator to really focus on how can you invite people to interact in a way that makes them feel safe and that they want to answer. And that's what I've learned a lot from the community design principles, and and then I think back to facilitating and doing workshops and things with the military and how very similar they are, but then how that can be applied to anything, to meetings, to presentations, to anything that we do. And it's so important to do that because it creates that inclusive and safe environment, which is what people are seeking.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting. And a lot of people, like, they are gradually going back to in person. I've heard that from a lot of like keynote speakers and whatnot. Being up on stage without actually having that chat functionality, it feels like a black hole. They feel that
Yeah,
they've got the energy of the crowd, but they don't know what people are thinking because they don't have access to the chat. And they've
that's
gotten
a
used to it. And they feel like they're actually conducting better virtual meetings when they have
mhm.
access to the chat rather than being in person. And there's always going to be an avenue for in person, but it's like, how do we improve the experience in person now to bring more of what the benefit of what we were seeing with the virtual in, right? I
Yeah,
don't
I'm
think you
just
have to
like,
choose anymore. It's just creativity that's going to limit you, right?
yeah. Yeah, exactly. I was just thinking it would be cool if we all had like Apple glasses and we had augmented reality. And so the keynote presenter could see all the chat happening in real time as they're presenting on stage.
Be a
Really
whole
cool.
lot of information to sort through.
It might be too much,
I
but
mean,
yeah.
it might be a little bit intimidating for that presenter to be able to do that. It's one thing to memorize your 20-minute keynote, but to actually have to filter real time those comments in front, like while you're actually on stage, that's intimidating. I'm not sure if I'd want to do that. But maybe this is where we can get better with like virtual reality and augmented reality and stuff like that. And that's where it's like, how could you capture the feeling of being on stage, but being
Mhm.
virtual?
Yeah, yeah,
These are all
exactly.
the interesting things, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that we should wrap this up. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention about play or community or anything that you'd like people to know?
This has been fantastic. I would encourage anyone that is looking to build a community to really focus on the people that you want in that community and then how you can best serve them. And I think that's the cool part about the community too, is because you can kind of see, like you said, all these different people from different periods of time in your life all coming together, but then they can all benefit from each other as well. So it's a really cool way to see that progress over time.
Yeah, exactly. And connecting is a skill. It's a valuable skill. Yeah. All right. So in terms of if people want to find you, Twitter, LinkedIn, just basically your name, right?
Yep.
Okay. And I'll
Yep.
put that in the show notes. And then it's the Bricks and Brand podcast. You can go into Mighty Networks and actually find like a community and you can type in like it's Bricks plus brands, like the actual plus
Yep.
sign, right?
Yep. Correct.
So they can find Benjamin's community there.